What's up guys, my name is John Evans, and in this video, I'm gonna tell you guys something that took me a long time to accept, and that is how athletes who had no access to any equipment and nothing but their body weight and a little bit of creativity were able to add more inches to their vertical than athletes with traditional barbell loading. If you guys don't know who I am, I have coached 4 of the current 6 individuals with 50-inch vertical jumps. Now I wanna be very clear, my best athletes absolutely use barbells. If you guys have watched Dom, myself, Josh, Donovan, Isaiah, they all use barbell-based loading. However, there are cases where athletes who do not have equipment have improved their vertical a drastic amount, and we are gonna go over how that happens in this video. So even though it's been a few years, I'm sure you guys have not forgotten about COVID-19. Leading into March of 2020, I had a handful of athletes in Italy and in China, and they were DMing me about a lot of the changes that they had noticed around their countries because of this virus. One of those things in particular was actually the fact that all of the gyms had completely closed down and they were locked inside. Preemptively, I put on my story that people should be taking this a little bit more seriously, and I actually decided to write a bunch of bodyweight programs and in anticipation for the changes that were to come. Obviously, COVID-19 happened, everyone was shut inside, and many things were closed, including gyms. Because I knew that barbells and dumbbells were incredibly important for jumping higher and training effectively, but we wouldn't have access to any of those things in a short period of time, I did my best to produce programs that were uncompromised in producing results for athletes. What I found by doing this was incredibly interesting. There were 2 guys that come to mind, Clifford Russell and Reed Harris. Reed Harris had been in the gym for multiple years, had trained traditionally with barbells for a ton of time, and went from doing rim grabs to one-handers and two-handers. Clifford actually improved his 30-meter sprint time by about 0.3 seconds, which is a massive amount, as well as jumping quite a bit higher. By using these programs, I found it was very obvious that traditional base loading obviously has its place, but that bodyweight training could be as effective, or in some cases more effective, for athletes who did not have access to equipment. Not only these guys, but Isaiah himself, the first person ever to break into that 50-inch vertical range, also used bodyweight training when he had ankle sprains, quad tendinopathy, and a laundry list of other injuries that we had to work around, as well as not having access to a gym. I actually found that sprinting alone was probably enough to improve his power indices to keep his vertical increasing over time. So when I go through my DMs, a lot of the times guys will ask me, do I need a gym to do THPStrength? And I want to be clear, you do not need a gym. It depends on what your training age is, again, what you have access to, and understanding the underlying mechanisms for adaptation for jumping higher. This is incredibly evident when you look online and see guys using gyms in the stupidest ways possible. So if you understand the underlying principles, you can jump a lot higher by taking advantage of those principles, pushing adaptation, and ultimately improving your power indices. So here's what I'm gonna explain in this video. First, we're gonna go over why bodyweight training can work for you, but not in a way that's like bodyweight training is underrated and vaguely. I'm gonna go over specifically what physiological adaptations take place when you do that bodyweight training. Then I'm gonna show you 5 different types of loading that you can use that will be validated with EMG, force plates, and ultimately just watching your vertical improve. I'm also gonna show you how you can use these different types of loading inside of your week to push adaptation, get a real training stimulus, and ultimately jump higher. And lastly, I'm gonna be clear about what the ceiling is with bodyweight training, because ultimately there is going to be an upper limit of what you can achieve without a weight room. However, you can make a ton of progress if you just understand the basic training laws and how to take advantage of those. And by using that bodyweight training and progressing it over time to push adaptation, get you fitter, still follow good periodization guidelines, and stay healthy in the process. So first, let's go over the actual method and how you take advantage of bodyweight training. So first, let's go over why bodyweight training can work. What are the actual principles, the underlying physiological mechanisms that take place when you do a given bodyweight exercise? When I was at Athletic Lab, we went over means and methods. Means were what you were using. Was it a dumbbell? Was it a kettlebell? Was it a barbell? And the methods are how you take advantage of those. This video is obviously about the means. We're going to be talking about bodyweight training. Because your body doesn't necessarily care about the means, whether it's a barbell or a dumbbell or a kettlebell, and it more so cares about the stimulus, you can still get really good really fast. I've talked about this a lot, but when you recruit force, you send a signal from your brain through your spinal cord into your muscle, and that ultimately moves you across space. If we can fire off more signals from the brain, we can get a higher transmission of force to the muscle and ultimately increase our vertical jump capabilities. If we're able to improve the electrical and chemical signals moving from the brain, spinal cord, and muscle, this is going going to push adaptation, you're going to get a good stimulus from it, and ultimately jump higher. So there are 4 types of equipment-free resistance training that I like to use with athletes to get them stronger and more explosive. The last means that I use are going to be sprints and plyos. With these 4 different types of bodyweight training and then sprinting and plyos, you can get people quite a bit better in a reasonable amount of time. So the first type of loading that I like to use is going to be partner-based loading. So I'll give you guys an illustration here. Imagine that I took my arm, I placed it out in front of me, and Isaiah took his hands and put it on top of my hand. Then he pushed me downwards and I resisted into his hand. Now why this works is because he's stronger pushing down than I am by pushing upwards. So even though eccentrically I can create more force than him, he is using 2 hands and he is way stronger than I am pushing downward, for example, in something like a tricep pushdown, than I would be in something like a dumbbell raise. The second reason why this works is because as I get fatigued, I'm actually going to send off more signals from my brain to continue pushing upwards against his hands or resisting him as he pushes downwards. So you're able to get really, really high tension inside of the muscle with this partner-based loading if you know how to set up the exercises correctly. So one of the exercises that I've actually used with Isaiah has been a lying leg extension. He lays on his back, puts his leg upwards. I put both my hands on his ankle and push downwards as he extends into my hands. You can also take advantage of some of the other aspects that we're going to talk about, one of them being leverage. If I push him down really, really aggressively in the bottom where his calf is against his thigh, he's going to be in a really weak position and I can use my whole body weight to resist him as he extends his leg upwards or I push him downwards. The second mean that we're going to talk about is overcoming isometrics or pushing into an immovable object. The reason why this works is because when we jump, there is a brief isometric period called the amortization period. And if you were to study the stress shortening cycle, you actually see that that isometric period increases in its importance as you do faster and faster activities. The reason why is because the muscle functions isometrically while the tendon lengthens and then releases that energy when it shortens. So we can strengthen the muscle isometrically and get more of those chemical and electrical signals traveling to the muscle by trying to move an immovable object. So I want you to imagine for a second that you just found a field goal post or a tree or something like that and you wrapped your arms around it and you tried to pick it up for about 5 seconds. Alex Interned, one of the best sports scientists in the world, uses these all the time, typically in the weight room, but you can do it without a barbell that is in a fixed position. Now, while it might be unconventional, it does work. I've actually done it with my truck. I've just tried to pick the truck up by holding on to the bars that are below the door that you step down on. I've tried doing almost a deadlift isometric, and it actually works better than using a barbell because the truck's lifted and it's a little bit easier to hold on to that. The next one we're going to talk about is using modified levers. So imagine for a second that you're holding a book bag close to your body, and as you move that book bag farther away from your body, it feels heavier and heavier. The reason why is because that external moment arm is increasing and the muscle has to work harder to overcome that change in the moment arm. Ultimately, our body is a lever system, and so we're going to take advantage of that lever system to get a good stimulus for adaptation. There are tons of ways that you can take advantage of this. One of the easiest ways is actually a Nordic hamstring curl. Now, this is using the partner-based loading and the leverage-based loading to take advantage of the fact that we're really, really weak as our body moves far away from that axis of rotation. So someone holds your feet down and you lean forward, keeping the pelvis in a really, really good position, lowering all the way until your chest is about to hit the ground, and then doing a push-up on the up phase, or if you're strong enough, you can just lift yourself back up. A couple other ways that you can take advantage of this would be something like a reverse Nordic. I started implementing these in 2020 after talking with Thomas Kortenbeck for quad tendinopathy, but it can also be a really good strength exercise. The reason why this works is because as you lean back, your line of action is moving away from the axis of rotation. This creates a really, really large moment arm, and as a result, the exercise gets increasingly harder as you go further. The same thing happens in a pistol squat or a sissy squat or really any exercise where you're moving into a deeper range of motion. You have to generate more internal force to overcome the fact that you're in a disadvantaged position, and you can take advantage of this in body weight training. The fourth means is going to be unilateral or asymmetric loading. The easiest way that you can think about this is like a pistol squat. If you're doing a double leg barbell back squat, you can balance and you can generate a lot of force and you get to a very, very deep position. Again, you're going to be in a mechanical disadvantage and the muscles are going to have to generate a lot of force to overcome that mechanical disadvantage. However, something like a pistol squat can still be a really, really good option. It's still triple extension. You're flexing at the knee, hip, and ankle, and this is very similar to jumping. Additionally, you're also in single leg support. So the free leg is out in front of you, and that is going to make it harder to stand up in the bottom of a squat. And I can almost guarantee that most of the people watching this video can't do 10 single leg pistol squats. Further, you can also make it more difficult by being in the bottom of a squat, moving your leg behind you and then back in front of you. You could add pauses in there. You could change the tempo. And by taking advantage of each of these different methods, we're able to use the means that we talked about to increase the stimulus and get good adaptation. And lastly, we're going to talk about plyometrics and sprinting. You guys know that I am a huge fan of sprinting. The reason why is because the intramuscular intramuscular forces are incredibly high and they happen incredibly fast. There's probably nothing more intense than maximal sprinting. When you hit the ground, there is a brief eccentric, isometric, and then concentric period that happens as you push off, and this stretch shortening cycle is incredibly potent for jumping higher. We also see that in athletes that do a lot of sprinting, their tendons and muscles look different. They typically have a lot of proximal mass up at their hip, and their tendons are incredibly stiff from years and years and years of these plyo contacts. Remember, sprinting is a plyometric. You take advantage of the same neural pathways, reflexes, and stretch shortening cycles that you do when you do a true plyometric. I talked about this in my last video, but also plyometrics are a great way to push adaptation and you don't need any equipment. The problem with this is that most guys only do plyometrics, don't have any resistance training, and then they end up falling flat on their face, and it's very hard to progress over time. Jumping itself is a plyometric, so going out and doing a jump session is a great way to jump higher. It's probably the best way to jump higher. Now, you guys might not remember this, but Isaiah had sprained his ankle really, really bad and had quad tendinopathy, and the reverse Nordics and sprinting function to get his quad tendon healthy as well as improve his body composition and rate of force development. So while you might be gung-ho to use a barbell and get in the gym and use equipment, there's still a lot of ways to improve without equipment. All right, so lastly, let's put this all together in a actual jump training program. So first, you're gonna wanna do your sprints on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. After you finish those sprints, you're gonna wanna pick one of those resistance-based exercises that we talked about. I would probably start with one of those very intense isometric exercises. The reason why is because you can get to basically max intramuscular force and neural drive. So what this would look like, you wanna be between 100 and 300 meters in your sprint work. You're gonna wanna do anywhere from 10 to 30 meters with a minute rest, but for every 10 meters that you run. So if you do 10 by 10, you're at 100 meters total and you would rest 1 minute between each set. If you're at the upper range, you might be doing 10 by 30 and you would rest 3 minutes between each rep of sprinting. Obviously, this is after a full warm up. You'd finish your sprints and then you would do your overcoming isometric. So after your sprints, you would do your overcoming isometrics. The reason why is because the intramuscular forces and neural drive is very, very high, and you're gonna wanna put that first in your workout. So for example, you're gonna wanna do something that loads up the hips and quads. So you might find a tree or a field goal post, put some spikes on and push into that for about 5 seconds for 3 to 5 sets. I would recommend switching up which isometric you do. So maybe the first day you're pushing into that tree. The next day, maybe you're trying to pick up a truck or a car by the bumper or something stable. And then maybe the next day you just find a door frame and you do a single leg press upwards into the door frame. All of these are RFD exercises. They're all overcoming isometrics and you can get really, really good stimulus from them. Afterwards, I typically recommend doing some form of triple extension through a full range of motion. The one that comes to mind is going to be a pistol squat. You could start by just squatting down to a chair and going until it feels difficult. Typically, if guys haven't done a lot of pistols, something like 4 by 10 each leg would work. Again, I'd probably keep some variety in there. So maybe the first day I do just a slow tempo down to a chair. The next day, maybe I decrease the reps, hold on to something and do a full range of motion. And maybe the next day on Friday, after my overcoming isometrics, I would do pauses. Afterwards, I'd probably do some posterior chain work, and Nordics are probably gonna be the best way to get good loading. For these, I typically keep the volume pretty low, but since you don't have a barbell and there's not a lot of loading, you could probably do 3 by 6 and be fine. If you want to add some variety in there, you can also do partner-based loading, lay on the ground and have someone pull your hamstring downward with both their hands, and then as you go back upwards, they just resist you. You can do this for whatever volume you want. Typically, I'd start with higher volumes and go to lower volumes, and then the person resisting you would probably have to know what they're doing, but just tell them that you want to be at about a 6 or 7, and if they're resisting you too hard, to decrease that resistance a little bit. Now, after you do those high intensity days on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, you will have gotten quite a bit of training volume. And then you can also go in and do a jump session on Saturday. So do your full warm up, go in and jump for about 20 to 30 minutes. These are max effort jumps with perfect technique, and this will ultimately function to improve your technique as well as your power in something that you're trying to get better at, which is jumping. Remember, specificity is king. Okay, so let's talk about the ceiling on bodyweight training, because ultimately you can't do this forever. Eventually, you're probably gonna need to add some external load. Now, the sprints and things like that, you can basically progress because they self-intensify. So as you do them more, you're gonna get better at them, and ultimately they're gonna help you get faster and more explosive. If you can do 10 bodyweight pistol squats where you're doing 10 reps where your leg's going from in front of you to behind you, it's gonna be really, really hard to get a true max strength stimulus. So while it might take you months and months to get to that point, at the end of the day, after 3 to 4 months, it might be time for you to find a gym. The reason why is because I can just add more weight to a barbell. I can't really do that with a pistol squat. Additionally, it's gonna be hard for you to get in that middle range for strength strength speed because you can't move an external object that's really, really heavy. So while you're gonna be at the far end of speed strength, and maybe you're getting a lot of good isometric loading and some max strength loading, at the end of the day, you're gonna get strong enough where that stuff isn't gonna be enough for you to improve. And again, you're not gonna be able to do the strength speed work that really moves the needle forward and helps you get more explosive. Quick story for you guys. When COVID happened, I wrote out a 12-week progression for body weight training. Now, I made the training incredibly hard. I did all the things that I just talked about, but added even more work on top of that. Specifically, I added tempo work on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so guys were running anywhere from 15 to 2,000 meters in those workouts, as well as doing just a bunch of body weight circuits. After the first 4 weeks, it was really, really hard to find progressions for each of those exercises. The reason being is that on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, they already had quite a bit of variety. Progressing this was difficult because when I might move into something like accentuated eccentrics, I didn't really have that luxury with something like a pistol squat. I was able to take advantage of sissy squats with pauses and maybe some reverse Nordics, but after that second 4-week cycle, I got into the last one and found again that it was very, very difficult to continue progressing. So while that cycle involved a lot of plyometrics, I was able to make it a little bit more specific and take out of the general work. After 12 weeks, it was incredibly difficult not to just go back, change the sets and reps without finding more variety. And that is really ultimately the biggest limiter in bodyweight training. You can still get really, really good, but at the end of the day, having more tools in your tool belt is advantageous to you. So if you're an athlete watching this and maybe some of this has gone completely over your head, you don't have any access to equipment, but you still want to train hard, consider signing up for THP. Right now, we're actually running an offer where if you buy the annual plan, it's actually half the price if you paid for the month-to-month coaching. Ultimately, that'll get you through those first 3 months, and eventually we can progress you into actual training. And if you're watching this and you're thinking, John, I want to do Isaiah's training, we talked about this in the podcast, but you are not Isaiah. You have to earn the right to do that advanced loading. If you look at someone like a gymnast, they train for years with nothing but their body weight, and they are some of the strongest and most explosive athletes in the world. You can look at guys like Clifford Russell and Reed Harris, and there are tons of other examples of guys who improved a ton just by doing bodyweight training. That said, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you like and comment. I try to get back to as many comments as I possibly can, and I'll see you next time.